They betrayed you, and they were absolutely certain it would break you. But what they didn't expect was that their betrayal would be the very thing that sets you free and quietly dismantles their control. If this resonates with you, pause for a moment and reflect. Are you reacting in a way that feeds their ego, or are you choosing the silence that protects your power? If this message speaks to your experience, stay with me, because understanding this dynamic is how you truly reclaim control. Betrayal in the narcissistic dynamic is rarely impulsive or accidental. It is often a calculated power move. It is not just about infidelity, deception, or emotional abandonment. It is about dominance. At the core of narcissism lies an unstable sense of self that depends heavily on external validation. Control becomes their emotional oxygen. When they feel that control slipping, when you become more independent, more self-assured, or less reactive, betrayal can become a strategy to reassert superiority. It sends a chilling message: I can hurt you and you will still stay. The act of betrayal is designed to destabilize your emotional center. It creates confusion, self-doubt, and a frantic need for answers. That chaos benefits them. When you question your worth, when you compete for their attention, when you try to fix what they broke, you reinforce their position of power. Your emotional reaction becomes proof that they matter profoundly. It feeds their ego and restores their sense of control. For a narcissistic personality, relationships are often transactional. Loyalty is not sacred, admiration is. If admiration dips, they may seek it elsewhere, not necessarily because the other person is better, but because the act itself reinforces their desirability. Betrayal becomes a performance of dominance. It is a way to remind you that they believe they have options, that they are wanted, that they hold the leverage. There is also an element of punishment embedded in the betrayal. If you challenge them, set a boundary, or exposed inconsistency, the betrayal can serve as retaliation. It communicates, this is what happens when you don't comply. It is an attempt to condition you into submission through emotional pain. What makes this dynamic particularly damaging is that the betrayal often comes wrapped in justification. They may blame you for being distant, too demanding, or not appreciative enough. This shifts responsibility away from them and keeps you defending yourself instead of recognizing the manipulation. In their internal narrative, betrayal is not cruelty. It is strategy, entitlement, and self-preservation disguised as inevitability. The shock factor of narcissistic betrayal is not accidental. It is engineered. When the betrayal is revealed, it often feels sudden, disorienting, and deeply destabilizing. That disorientation is part of the mechanism. Narcissistic dynamics frequently involve cycles of idealization and devaluation. You may have been praised, future faked, or made to feel uniquely chosen. That emotional high creates attachment. So when betrayal occurs, the contrast is so extreme that it rattles your sense of reality. This shock serves a psychological purpose. It throws you into survival mode. When people are shocked, they seek clarity and relief. You may replay conversations, question your memory, or search for signs you missed. In that state, your focus narrows to one goal: restoring emotional equilibrium. And who becomes the perceived source of that relief? The very person who caused the pain. This is how trauma bonds are reinforced. The injury and the comforter are the same person. The narcissist anticipates this destabilization. They expect you to be flooded with confusion and urgency. Shock weakens boundaries because it overwhelms cognitive processing. You may become more willing to accept partial truths, vague explanations, or hollow apologies just to make the chaos stop. Your nervous system craves stability, and they position themselves as the gatekeeper of that stability. There is also a public dimension to the shock. Sometimes the betrayal is revealed in a way that feels humiliating through social media, mutual acquaintances, or sudden emotional withdrawal. That public or relational exposure compounds the injury. It can trigger shame, which further reduces your confidence and increases your dependency on their version of events. Most importantly, shock disrupts identity. You may think, how could I not see this? That self-doubt is powerful. It shifts the narrative from they betrayed me to what's wrong with me. That internal shift benefits them enormously. When you doubt your perception, you are more susceptible to gaslighting and manipulation. The shock was never just collateral damage. It was part of the control strategy, creating emotional fog so thick that you momentarily lose sight of your own strength and clarity. When you do not react the way they expected, something profound shifts in the narcissistic dynamic. Emotional supply, admiration, outrage, pleading, jealousy, validation is the currency that sustains them. They anticipate that betrayal will generate a surge of that supply. Tears, confrontation, desperate attempts to win them back, all of it reassures them that they are powerful enough to disrupt your emotional world. But when your response is calm, measured, or absent altogether, the supply line is interrupted. This disruption is deeply unsettling for a narcissistic personality. Their internal stability depends on external reactions. If they cannot provoke you, they cannot confirm their impact. Silence, composure, or detachment denies them the feedback loop they rely on. Instead of seeing distress that validates their dominance, they are met with ambiguity. And ambiguity creates anxiety. They may initially interpret your lack of reaction as temporary shock. They expect the emotional eruption to come later, but when it doesn't, confusion begins to set in. They might escalate behavior, posting provocatively, flaunting a new relationship, or attempting indirect contact, all designed to trigger a response. The goal is not reconciliation, it is reaction. Even anger is acceptable. Indifference is not. Without emotional supply, their sense of importance wavers. They may begin to question whether they miscalculated their value in your life. That possibility threatens the grandiose self-image they work hard to maintain. If you are not chasing, not competing, not demanding explanations, then perhaps they were not as central to your identity as they believed. This is where the dynamic quietly reverses. The person who once felt destabilized regains equilibrium. The person who expected control begins to feel uncertainty. Your restraint communicates self-sufficiency. It suggests that your emotional survival does not depend on their validation. And for someone who relies on being indispensable, that realization is destabilizing. The absence of reaction becomes more powerful than any confrontation. It removes reinforcement. It starves manipulation of its reward. It forces them to confront something they avoid at all costs, the possibility that their influence has limits. When you respond to betrayal with strength instead of collapse, it creates what is known as an ego injury. For a narcissistic personality, the ego is not sturdy. It is inflated but fragile, grand but easily punctured. They construct an identity around superiority, desirability, and emotional dominance. Betrayal was supposed to reinforce that identity. It was meant to prove they are powerful enough to wound you and still remain central in your life. But when you maintain composure, set boundaries, or quietly walk away, you disrupt that narrative. An ego injury occurs when reality contradicts the image they have of themselves. If they see themselves as irresistible, your refusal to chase challenges that belief. If they see themselves as indispensable, Your independence exposes a painful truth. They are not. This contradiction does not lead to self-reflection in the way it might for a healthier personality. Instead, it creates defensiveness, irritation, and sometimes rage. They may respond by minimizing you, criticizing you, or rewriting the story. They might say you were never that important to them, or that they were planning to leave anyway. These reactions are not evidence of indifference. They are protective maneuvers. The ego injury must be covered quickly to prevent deeper insecurity from surfacing. Admitting that your strength affected them would mean acknowledging vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens their carefully crafted self-image. Your growth becomes particularly injuring when you appear stable, grounded, even peaceful without them. It challenges the belief that they are the source of your worth. Narcissistic dynamics often rely on creating dependency. If you demonstrate autonomy, you dismantle that structure. It forces them to confront the possibility that their power was conditional, not absolute. The most destabilizing aspect of an ego injury is that it is invisible to others. On the surface, they may appear unbothered. Internally, however, there can be agitation, obsessive thinking, or an urgent need to restore status. They might seek new validation quickly, not because they have moved on, but because they need proof that they still matter. Your dignity becomes the mirror they did not want to face, reflecting back a version of themselves that is far less powerful than they believed. Narcissistic relationships are sustained not only by control, but by narrative. The story they construct about you and about themselves is central to maintaining their image. In that narrative, they are misunderstood, unappreciated, or unfairly treated. You are often cast as overly sensitive, demanding, unstable, or impossible to please. This storyline allows them to justify betrayal while preserving their self-concept as superior or blameless. When you react emotionally to betrayal, the narrative is easy for them to manage. Your anger becomes proof that you are dramatic. Your pain becomes evidence that you are weak. Your attempts to seek closure can be reframed as obsession. They rely on your visible distress to reinforce the version of events that protects them. It becomes easier for them to recruit sympathy from others, to paint themselves as the reasonable one. But when you refuse to engage in that script, when you do not publicly attack them, when you do not beg, when you quietly detach, the narrative begins to collapse. There is no dramatic reaction to point to, no explosive message to screenshot, no spectacle to support their portrayal of you as unstable. Your composure creates a gap between what they say about you and how you actually behave. That gap is threatening. Narcissistic personalities often manage their reputation carefully. If others begin to notice the inconsistency, it destabilizes their social image. They may attempt to compensate by exaggerating stories, spreading subtle rumors, or intensifying their charm with new audiences. The goal is to regain control of perception. Internally, the collapse of the narrative is even more unsettling. If you are not playing the role they assigned you, then the story itself becomes fragile. And if the story becomes fragile, their justification for betrayal weakens. Without a villain to point to, their behavior stands exposed. Your silence does not just protect your peace. It quietly dismantles the false storyline that once framed them as the hero and you as the problem. One of the most unexpected outcomes of narcissistic betrayal is your growth. They anticipate damage. They anticipate prolonged heartbreak, confusion, and a lingering attachment that keeps you psychologically tethered to them. What they do not anticipate is transformation. When you begin to heal, reflect, and rebuild, You shift from reacting to evolving. That evolution is profoundly unsettling for someone who assumed your identity was intertwined with their validation. Growth changes your internal dialogue. Instead of asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" you begin asking, "Why did I tolerate less than I deserved?" That subtle shift marks the beginning of autonomy. You start recognizing patterns, the gaslighting, the intermittent reinforcement, the cycles of idealization and devaluation. Awareness replaces self-blame. With awareness comes discernment, and with discernment comes stronger boundaries. As you grow, your nervous system stabilizes. The chaos that once felt intoxicating starts to feel exhausting. You may notice that peace, which once seemed boring compared to the highs and lows of the relationship, now feels grounding and safe. This recalibration of what feels normal is a powerful indicator of healing. You are no longer drawn to unpredictability as proof of passion. From their perspective, your growth represents loss. Not just the loss of you, but the loss of access to someone who once responded predictably. They may observe your progress from a distance, through mutual acquaintances or social media, and struggle to reconcile it with the image they held. If you are thriving, then the belief that you needed them weakens. If you are confident, then the idea that they diminished you becomes undeniable. Your growth also disrupts their sense of permanence. Narcissistic dynamics often rely on the assumption that you will remain emotionally available even after betrayal. When you move forward in tangible ways, emotionally, socially, professionally, it signals that the chapter has closed. What unsettles them most is that your growth is not loud. It is steady. It is quiet self-respect. It is the realization that the betrayal, painful as it was, became a catalyst rather than a collapse. The regret a narcissistic person feels after betrayal is rarely visible and almost never verbalized in a sincere way. It does not look like accountability. It does not sound like a heartfelt apology. Instead, it exists beneath layers of pride, defensiveness, and self-protection. What they experience is less about remorse for hurting you and more about the consequences of losing control, admiration, and access. When you no longer respond, when you no longer offer emotional supply, a quiet realization can begin to form. They may start to recognize that what they discarded was stable, loyal, and genuinely invested. But even this recognition is filtered through ego. The thought is not, "I harmed someone who loved me." It is often closer to, "I lost someone who made me feel powerful." Regret for them is tied to utility. If your presence elevated their image, regulated their emotions, or provided consistent validation, your absence creates a deficit. That deficit can feel uncomfortable. They may compare new relationships to the one they lost and notice differences. Stability may seem rare. Genuine empathy may feel irreplaceable. But admitting that would require vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens their identity. Instead of confessing regret, they may attempt to re-enter your life indirectly, a casual message, a nostalgic reference, a subtle reminder of shared memories. These gestures are not always about reconciliation. They are about testing whether the door is still open. If you respond warmly, their sense of power is restored. If you remain distant, the regret deepens into wounded pride. There is also a private reckoning that may occur when their narrative fails. If you are thriving, peaceful, and unmoved, it challenges the belief that they were the prize. That challenge can sting. They may never articulate it, but the awareness lingers. They underestimated you. The regret they carry is complicated. It is mixed with envy, entitlement, and self-justification. It is rarely pure, and because their identity depends on appearing unaffected, The very thing they feel most strongly is the one thing they are least likely to admit.